I was at a family party when everything changed. Laughter, food, and chatter filled the room, and in the middle of it all, I leaned over to my stepsister and told her something that made her eyes light up like never before. I said, "I just won a $1 million lottery ticket." She froze for a second, then her lips curled into the kind of smile you never forget, half excitement, half calculation. She hugged me, congratulated me, and within minutes she was gone. Gone from the room, gone from the party, and as it turned out, gone with the ticket. My family thought I was the fool of the night. They laughed behind my back, muttered about how careless I was, even hinted that maybe I deserved it. What none of them realized was that my stepsister hadn't just run off with a winning ticket, she'd run off with something else entirely. Something that wasn't even worth $1. And here's where things take a turn. Because what she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I had planned it all. That ticket wasn't real, but the consequences? The betrayal, the greed, the way the entire family turned against me in an instant, that was real. And that betrayal lit a fire inside me that would change everything. This isn't just about a stolen piece of paper. This is about family secrets, hidden scams, and the kind of revenge that no one saw coming. You think the story ends with a fake lottery ticket? Oh no. That was just the opening move. Before I dive into how it all unfolded, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know. My name is Elena, and for as long as I can remember, my family saw me as the safety net they never had to earn. I wasn't the golden child, I wasn't the one everyone bragged about, and I definitely wasn't the one anyone respected. I was the fallback. The emergency wallet. The person they came to when they had messed up, burned through their paychecks, or made promises they couldn't keep. And the worst part? I let them. Every single time. When my brother's car broke down for the third time because he ignored every oil change, guess who paid for it? Me. When my cousin wanted to throw an engagement party she couldn't afford, she called me, crying about how it would ruin her life if she couldn't pull it off. I dipped into my already thin savings to cover the bill. And when my own father's business deal went south, he looked me in the eye and told me that as his daughter I was supposed to step up. So I did. Thousands gone. No repayment. Not even a thank you. I was a teacher, scraping by in Albuquerque, living paycheck to paycheck, and somehow they treated me like I was their personal ATM. They mocked me for being just a teacher, laughed at my secondhand clothes, rolled their eyes at my old car. But the moment they needed something, suddenly I was useful. Suddenly I was family again. And then there was Lila, my stepsister. If entitlement had a face, it would be hers. She never worked more than a few months at any job before quitting because it was too boring or too stressful. She bragged about her shopping sprees, her nights out, her expensive taste in clothes and shoes, all of it paid for by her boyfriends or whoever she could manipulate at the time. But when those wallets dried up, she turned to me. She had this way of making her needs sound urgent, like the world would collapse if I didn't help her right away. "Elena, you don't understand. I'll literally lose everything if you don't lend me this money." And if I said no, she'd cry, guilt-trip me, or worse, she'd run to the rest of the family and spin the story to make me the villain. Suddenly, I was cold-hearted Elena, the sister who couldn't even help her own flesh and blood. It didn't matter that she was lying. It didn't matter that she had never paid me back once. What mattered was that she made the story loud enough for everyone to hear, and everyone chose to believe her. Over time, I began to notice a pattern. They didn't see me as Elena, the daughter, the sister, the cousin. I was Elena, the backup plan. I was disposable, useful only for what I could give. And if I couldn't give, I was ignored. They didn't invite me to outings unless they needed someone to cover the check. They didn't answer my calls unless they were the ones dialing first. I was invisible until my wallet made me relevant again. It hurt more than I let on. 'cause no matter how strong I tried to be, part of me still wanted their approval. I wanted my dad to look at me with pride, not disappointment. I wanted my stepsister to treat me like an equal, not a piggy bank. I wanted a family that cared about me for who I was, not for what I could provide. But deep down, I knew I didn't have that. And the truth? They underestimated me. Every time they mocked me, every time they dismissed me, every time they drained me dry, they thought they were getting away with it. They thought I would always be there. They thought I would always forgive, always cave in, always stay silent. But even then, even before the night of the fake ticket, something inside me was shifting. I was tired of being the one they leaned on. Tired of being the one left behind. Tired of being disposable. They had no idea that the very same woman they treated like dirt was about to turn the tables. The night of the party was supposed to be light-hearted. Just a casual family gathering, nothing extraordinary. People were laughing, plates of food were being passed around, kids were running through the living room. But for me, it wasn't just another family event. It was the perfect stage for the plan that had been brewing in my mind.
I had slipped the fake lottery ticket into my wallet earlier that day. It looked real enough. Bright colors, bold numbers, everything aligned perfectly. If you didn't know any better, you'd swear it was the genuine thing. I wasn't trying to win a prize that night. I was testing something. Testing her. I waited until the drinks had been poured, until people were relaxed, until conversations were flowing easily. Then, with a casual smile, I leaned closer to my stepsister Lila and whispered, just loud enough for her and a few others nearby to hear, "I just won $1 million lottery ticket." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Her glass hovered in her hand. Her eyes widened, then sparkled with a greedy light I had seen so many times before. She plastered on a smile, the kind of smile that fools most people into thinking she's happy for them. But I knew that look. I knew it too well. She squealed, hugged me tightly, and shouted, "Oh my God, Elena! You're rich! You deserve this so much!" Heads turned. My cousins clapped. My father raised an eyebrow, suddenly interested. And just like that, I was the center of attention for the first time in years. But it wasn't admiration I saw, it was hunger. Their eyes weren't on me. They were on the ticket they hadn't even seen yet. Lila was quick, almost too quick. She asked to see it, and I pulled the slip of paper halfway out of my wallet, just enough for her to catch a glimpse of the numbers and logo. Her eyes locked on it as if it were a diamond sitting in the open. She touched my arm, squeezed it, and told me I was finally going to get the life I deserved. But her voice shook with something else, anticipation. The rest of the night blurred into shallow congratulations, forced smiles, and murmurs I pretended not to hear. But Lila, she barely left my side. She was glued to me, asking me what I was going to do with the money, who I'd help first, whether I'd finally move out of my tiny apartment. Every question was sugar-coated, but I could hear the real meaning beneath it. How much of that money can she take for herself? And then, just as suddenly as she clung to me, she was gone. One moment she was laughing beside me, the next she had disappeared into the hallway. At first, I thought she'd gone to the bathroom. I didn't think much of it, but when I reached into my wallet a few minutes later, my chest tightened. The ticket wasn't there. My hands shook as I rifled through every pocket, every fold, hoping I had misplaced it. But no, it was gone. And so was Lila. Whispers started circling the room. Someone asked where she'd gone. Someone else muttered something about her leaving in a rush. My father looked at me with a mix of disbelief and disappointment. My brother laughed under his breath and said, "Figures. Elena finally wins something, and she loses it in the same night." The humiliation hit like a punch to the gut. I stood there, frozen, as the people who were supposed to be my family smirked, shook their heads, and muttered about how careless I was. Not one of them offered to help me find her. Not one of them defended me. And in that moment, Surrounded by their judgment and betrayal, I realized exactly what I had confirmed. I had given them a chance to show who they truly were, and they did. Greedy, selfish, ready to turn on me in a second. What none of them knew, what not even Lila knew, was that the ticket she had just stolen wasn't worth a single cent. It was nothing but a piece of paper. But the way she had grabbed it, the way the family mocked me, the way they dismissed me as a fool, that would fuel what came next. And as I stood there, my stepsister running off with a worthless ticket and my family laughing at my expense, I made myself a promise. This wasn't over. The hours after that party were some of the darkest I can remember. Word spread fast, faster than I could have imagined. Lila had vanished into the night with what everyone thought was a winning lottery ticket, and the story twisted on its own before I could even open my mouth to explain. By the next morning, calls started coming in. Not calls asking if I was okay, not calls checking whether I'd managed to find Lila, but calls filled with snickers, disbelief, and judgment. My own father left me a voicemail saying, "I raised you better than to flaunt something like that. You put a target on your back, Elena. You were careless." He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't even ask if I wanted him to help track her down. To him, I was just stupid. My brother wasn't any kinder. He texted me, "Guess that's karma. Maybe now you'll stop acting like you're better than everyone just because you got lucky for once." Better than everyone. I had spent years cleaning up his messes, paying for his repairs, covering his tabs when he couldn't. But the second he thought I had something of my own, I was suddenly arrogant in his eyes. It didn't stop there. My cousins chimed in, whispering to others that I had made up the whole thing to get attention, that the ticket was probably fake and I was trying to scam sympathy out of the family. They laughed about me behind my back, passing the story around until it became their favorite punchline. The family ATM had finally gone bankrupt in the most humiliating way possible. And Lila, she didn't just disappear. She made sure everyone knew her version first. She spread rumors that I had begged her to hold on to the ticket because I couldn't be trusted to keep it safe. She told people that I had panicked, called her names, and tried to grab it back, and she had fled because I wasn't thinking straight. By the time her version reached the rest of the family, I wasn't just a fool. I was unstable, irresponsible, greedy. The betrayal cut deeper than I could admit. Every glance from them felt heavier. Every silence from those I had once helped screamed louder than their insults. For years, I had given and given, hoping that someday they would see me for more than a wallet. And now, in the one moment when they thought I had something for myself, they discarded me like garbage. I stopped going to family gatherings. The few times I showed up, the whispers followed me from room to room. "That's her, the one who lost $1 million ticket. What did she expect, flashing it around like that? You know, some people just aren't built for luck." I would sit in the corner, pretending not to hear, my face burning as the laughter echoed. Even outside the family, the story traveled. Friends of cousins, old neighbors, even co-workers seemed to know some twisted version of what had happened. I caught people exchanging looks when I walked by. Some pitied me, some mocked me. Nobody really cared about the truth. And through it all, Lila stayed gone. No apology, no explanation, just silence. She had taken what she thought was $1 million prize and vanished, leaving me behind to deal with the wreckage. It was my lowest point. Alone, ashamed, mocked by the very people I had sacrificed for, betrayed by someone who shared my home, my blood, my table. There were nights when I lay awake replaying every word, every sneer, every cruel laugh. They thought I was weak. They thought I was finished. But what they didn't realize was that they had given me something far more valuable than acceptance. They had given me clarity. In that humiliation, I saw every truth I had been too blind, or too desperate, to admit. They didn't love me. They didn't respect me. And they never would. That's when the fire inside me grew. I wasn't going to beg for their approval anymore. I wasn't going to let their lies define me. If Lila wanted to play the thief, and the rest of them wanted to play the jury, then I would write the ending myself. Because the fake ticket was only the beginning. I had a plan, and my revenge wouldn't just hit her, it would expose them all. A year can change everything. 12 months after that party, I was no longer the Elena they thought they knew. I had cut the ties clean. Every call went unanswered, every text ignored. When they tried to reach me on social media, I blocked them. When relatives asked why I didn't show up to family events, I let the silence speak for me. At first, they were shocked. Then they grew angry. And eventually, they stopped trying. For the first time in my life, I was free. No more last-minute calls demanding money. No more guilt trips. No more playing the role of the invisible daughter who was only noticed when she opened her wallet. I lived quietly, teaching my classes, walking home to my small apartment, and keeping my head down. To them, it looked like I had vanished into mediocrity. They probably thought I was still broke, still struggling, still invisible. But behind the scenes, fate handed me something none of them could have imagined. It started with a ticket I almost didn't buy. I was at a gas station, standing in line, exhausted after a long week at work. On impulse, I grabbed a lottery ticket and tucked it into my purse. I didn't think about it again until the night of the drawing, when the numbers lit up on my screen one by one. At first, I thought I was misreading them. I checked again, then again. My heart pounded, so hard I could barely breathe. It was real. $50 million. Not one, not two. 50. The irony wasn't lost on me. After being humiliated for a fake $1 million ticket, I had won something 50 times bigger. But this time no one knew, and I intended to keep it that way. I didn't run to show anyone. I didn't shout it from rooftops. I didn't even tell my closest friends at work. I cashed in quietly, set up accounts under airtight legal protection, and made sure my name wouldn't be splashed across headlines. The Elena my family thought they knew, broke, defeated, invisible, was the mask I wore in public. Behind it, I was building something much greater. The first thing I did was secure my future. Investments, real estate, a financial advisor who knew how to keep things discreet. Then I turned to something closer to my heart. I had spent years watching teachers like me burn out, scraping together money for classroom supplies, tutoring on weekends just to pay rent. I knew where the real need was, and I wanted to give back to the people who had always been overlooked. So I started a nonprofit. Quietly, carefully, I built an organization dedicated to helping educators and elderly folks in my community, people who had given their lives to service and received little in return. I hired staff. I funded scholarships. I delivered resources straight into schools that had been ignored for decades. And every time a teacher's eyes filled with gratitude, every time an elderly neighbor said thank you, it healed something in me that my family had broken. I didn't do it alone. Aunt Diane was the only one who had ever truly stood by me. She never asked for money, never mocked my job, never treated me like I was less. She listened. She cared. And when I finally revealed a fraction of the truth to her, not the whole story, just enough, she didn't gape or demand a share. She smiled and said, "You deserve this, Elena. Do good with it." So I did, and she became the quiet rock beside me, helping me steer the mission in the right direction. Meanwhile, my family carried on believing I was scraping by. To them, I was the sister who had lost everything, the cousin too ashamed to show her face, the daughter who had faded into nothing. They pitied me. They mocked me behind closed doors. They told themselves I was too weak to survive without them. I let them believe it. Every day I stayed silent. Every time I ignored a call, every moment I withheld the truth, the power shifted further into my hands. They thought they had written me off. They thought the joke was still on me. But little did they know, the punchline was coming, and it would hit them harder than they could ever imagine. The silence I built around myself gave me more than peace, it gave me clarity. Without the constant noise of their demands, I started seeing the cracks in the story of my family. Things I had ignored for years suddenly stood out like glaring red flags. It began when I went through some old papers Aunt Diane had kept after my grandmother passed. She'd been the only one Grandma trusted, the only one who didn't circle like a vulture when the end was near. While we were sorting through boxes one afternoon, Aunt Diane handed me a file of bank statements she said had never added up. At first, I skimmed them out of curiosity. Then my breath caught. Grandma's account, the one she had carefully built over her lifetime, showed massive withdrawals in the months leading up to her death. We're not talking hundreds, not even thousands. We're talking hundreds of thousands. Gone. Transferred into accounts I didn't recognize. Names appeared on the paperwork, and one of them hit me like a punch. My father's. The deeper I dug, the uglier it became. Grandma's estate had been drained quietly, piece by piece, funneled into his so-called business ventures. Ventures that, according to every record I could find, failed miserably. But instead of taking responsibility, he had buried the truth. He told the family that Grandma hadn't left much, that medical bills and debts had eaten through her savings. And everyone believed him. Everyone, except Aunt Diane. The realization made my stomach turn. All those years I had worked 2 jobs just to make rent. All those times I had pulled money from my own pocket to cover my father's losses, thinking I was helping him recover. All while he sat on stolen inheritance money that should have gone to all of us. Money Grandma had intended for her children and grandchildren, not as shady deals. And then it clicked. Lila's little stunt with the fake ticket suddenly looked like child's play compared to this. She might have run off thinking she'd struck gold, but my father had already gutted the family treasure chest long before that night. Her betrayal stung, but his betrayal was unforgivable. I couldn't let it go. So I did what my family never expected me to do. I documented everything. Every transfer, every receipt, every hidden account. I requested copies of probate records, dug through old court filings, traced shell companies tied back to him. What I found was enough to burn the carefully built lie he'd been hiding behind for years. It was almost poetic. They had mocked me as the irresponsible one, the careless one, the greedy one. But in reality, the man who raised me had stolen from his own mother's legacy, and everyone else had been too blind or too comfortable to notice. The more I uncovered, the colder I became. I stopped feeling sadness for their betrayal and started feeling something sharper. Purpose. Every paper I filed, every document I tucked away, was another nail in the coffin of their deception. I didn't lash out. I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I let him keep thinking I was weak, that I was still licking my wounds from the fake ticket fiasco. He thought I had disappeared into nothing, but really I was watching him, studying him, waiting for the perfect moment. And while I built my nonprofit, while I grew stronger in silence, I kept those files locked away. I knew one day they would be my weapon. Because here's the truth. Lila may have stolen a worthless slip of paper, but my father stole something far greater. He robbed generations. He robbed dignity. He robbed trust. And when the time came, I wasn't just going to tell the family what he had done. I was going to show them. With proof so undeniable, even he wouldn't be able to worm his way out. I kept every receipt, every statement, every signature, and I was waiting for the moment their greedy little worlds would come crashing down. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day when my family used to gather at my father's house for food, gossip, and the same old stories. I hadn't been there in over a year, but the invitation came out of nowhere. "We'd love to see you, Elena. Come by. It's been too long." I almost laughed when I read it. Too long. They had written me off as a failure, mocked me behind closed doors, and spread lies about me. But suddenly, they wanted me back? I knew exactly why. Word had spread that someone in the family had hit financial trouble. A business deal gone wrong, debts piling up, My father's business, of course. And just like always, when they needed saving, they thought of me. So I went, not because I wanted to help, but because the timing was finally right. The moment I walked in, all eyes landed on me. Some smiled, awkward and forced. Others looked me up and down, probably expecting me to look ragged, worn down, broken. Instead, I walked in calmly, dressed simply, my head high. I let them believe whatever they wanted for a moment. It didn't take long before the begging began. My father pulled me aside, his tone soft but his eyes sharp. "Elena, you've always been the responsible one. I need you to step up again. Things haven't been easy lately, and, well, your family needs you." My brother chimed in soon after, reminding me how family should stick together. Even my cousins, who had once laughed at me, found their way into the conversation, dropping hints about rent, bills, and overdue loans. They circled like vultures, and I let them. I listened quietly, nodding here and there, until finally I set my drink down and said the words that froze the room. "Do you all remember that night? The night of the lottery ticket?" The silence that followed was thick. Some shifted uncomfortably. My brother smirked, as if it were still the funniest thing he'd ever witnessed. My stepsister Lila stiffened in her chair. I looked straight at her and said, "You thought you were clever, didn't you, running off with that ticket? The ticket that wasn't worth a dime." Her face went pale. Gasps rippled across the room. "Yes," I continued. "It was fake. I wanted to see who would betray me first. And Lila, you proved me right in less than an hour." Whispers broke out, eyes darting between her and me. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but I raised my hand. "Save it, because that's not even the best part of the story." I leaned back, calm, collected, every word deliberate. "See, while you all mocked me, while you spread your little rumors, I was busy. And life has a funny sense of humor, doesn't it? Because not long after that fiasco, I actually won. $50 million. The room erupted. My cousins gasped. My brother cursed under his breath. My father's jaw clenched, so hard I thought it might snap. And Lila, her eyes filled with the kind of hunger that had driven her to steal in the first place. But I wasn't done. "I didn't waste it," I said. "I invested. I built a nonprofit. I helped people who deserved help. People who worked hard. People who cared about others. Not leeches. Not liars. Not thieves." Their faces shifted from shock to rage, then to something else, fear. Because they knew what was coming next. I pulled out a folder I had brought with me, thick with papers, neatly organized. I laid it on the table in front of my father. "And while I was building my life, I was also uncovering yours. Every transfer, every hidden account, every dollar you stole from Grandma's estate." He froze. His lips parted, but no sound came out. My brother's smugness vanished. My cousins whispered furiously. Lila stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "You called me irresponsible," I said quietly. "You called me stupid, greedy, careless. But the truth is, I was the only one who wasn't stealing. I was the only one who wasn't lying. And now, everyone gets to see exactly who you are." The silence was deafening. My father's face turned red, his hands trembling on the papers he refused to touch. My brother tried to speak, but no words came. For once, not a single insult, not a single laugh, not a single excuse could be made. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and looked around the room one last time. "I don't owe you anything. Not money, not forgiveness, not even my presence. Enjoy the mess you made." And with that I walked out, calm, untouched, free. Because sometimes revenge isn't about screaming, or fighting, or getting even. Sometimes it's about success so loud, their silence becomes the punishment. Walking away that day, I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel the satisfaction of winning. What I felt was lighter, freer than I had in years. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chained to their greed, their constant demands, or their twisted idea of family. They thought I was weak. They thought I was careless. They thought they could use me, discard me, and laugh about it behind my back. But in the end, it was their greed that exposed them. It was their betrayal that set me free. And it was my silence that became the loudest answer of all. Sometimes survival isn't about fighting for their love, or proving your worth, or trying to fix what's broken. Sometimes survival is cutting the rope and walking away. They mocked me for losing a fake ticket, but what they didn't know was that my real jackpot was never about the 50 million. My real jackpot was reclaiming my dignity, my peace, and my freedom from them. I built a life without their poison. I helped people who deserved it, and I stood tall on my own terms. That's the kind of wealth no amount of stolen inheritance or fake loyalty can ever buy. But now I want to hear from you. Would you have switched the ticket or found another way? Do you think I went too far, or was it the only way to survive? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious what you'd have done in my shoes. And stick around, because next time, I've got a story about a fiancé who thought he could cheat his way through an engagement until he was caught at the altar in front of the entire wedding party. You won't want to miss it.